So, hi, Lei. Let's begin with, you will tell me who are you and how you began with Oskara Ичазо.
Okay. Well, I was at Esalen in 1970, and I knew people that went to Arica, Chile to study with Oscar. He agreed with Claudio Naranjo to take a group of Americans and work with them for 10 months. So I was a seeker. I was looking for some answers to my personal, we could say, demons, and the things that I had a cross-cultural experience in Iran, and I came back after 3 years and I had a lot of culture shock, and I was looking for some internal work. And the people came back from Chile after working with Oscar for that time, almost a year, and I saw big changes in them. And they looked much more peaceful and happy, and they seemed to know where they were going, where they had direction, and I didn't have that. So I pursued, they did a first United States training in New York City, and I managed to go and do that one for 3 months. And then Oscar would come every night and lecture. So I developed more of a personal connection with him, and then the people that he trained did all these exercises with us, physical exercises, traumatic exercises, meditations, a whole variety of things. And we studied his work and did his work, and that's how I started.
Tell me more, if you can, about the Iraq thing and what was the cultural shock?
Oh, in Iran? Well, it's a Shiite Muslim culture. It's not an easy culture to be in for Americans, and I was felt very isolated. Lonely there. I didn't have much work until I went to the capital city, Tehran, and I taught in the National School for the Blind. They had to have English, and I taught English as a foreign language. But again, I was looking for answers, so I found that living in that culture a very isolating experience. So by the time I came back, I felt a little bit crazy.
And why you have been there?
I was there in the American Peace Corps.
What's that?
Well, the Peace Corps is an organization to put Americans into countries to do work with agriculture or with teaching English or many different things. I worked in a village community development project, but there wasn't enough work to keep me busy, so then I went to this other work in the capital city. So I was trying to help developing countries in different ways, and that was the program, the American Peace Corps.
And you've done it voluntarily?
It was volunteer work.
Voluntarily.
Yeah.
And why you came there? Why you decided to participate in it?
I just was idealistic. I wanted to do something to help, to be service. I wanted to be in service, and the idea of going outside of my country was interesting. Was attractive to me.
And why you get a shock when you came back? So.
Well, the culture was so different. There's so much stimulation, so much going on. I walk into a supermarket and it feels very disorienting. We have so many things, and it's a very different life in that kind of country.
And how did you find Esalen?
I knew about Esalen because in the Peace Corps training, we had a group, we had some guys come from to do what they call training groups. They were really encounter groups that Esalen was famous for. So I started reading about Esalen, and then I came to California and got into this program. So I read it. I had some experience of some of the Esalen techniques, and then I came out to California and I applied for this program.
And you've been like a volunteer in Esalen too, or what?
Well, I paid for this 3-month program, but then they offered me a job and I started working there. I was on the staff. I wasn't doing groups, but I was on, helping the upkeep of the place, greeting people when they come in, cleaning the hot springs, that kind of thing.
And for how long have you been in Esalen?
I was there a year until the people came back from Chile. And by then I knew I needed something more than what Esalen could offer me. And I liked the changes that I saw in the people that I knew before and then after. And the after changes were very good. It seemed very good to me. So.
And during this year, what happened was your cultural shock?
Well, by then I was adapted. It took me some time, but I went to Esalen, and that was very helpful. To be in a group process, to work on some of the issues you might have about relating to the culture or to people.
And John Lilly or Timothy Lilly, you met them in Esalen? Or?
John Lilly I knew at Esalen. When I came there, he went off to Chile, but he came back early. Well, let's say he came back after 7 months. The others were still there. So he started working with a group of us at Esalen, doing some his work that he had. He taught us some practices, some exercises that we did with him.
From Oscar?
From Oscar, yeah. And then I was going to do his sensory isolation tank that he had built off the Esalen property, but the owner had a disagreement with him being there, so I was never able to do that work with him. But he talked about that work quite a lot, and I thought that would have been an interesting experience, but I never got to do that with him.
So you began to tell me about the New York Oskara Ичазо.
Yeah, he started in New York, in Manhattan, right in the center of things at the big hotel there, the Essex House, is where they had this 3-month, it was 3 months. I did a 3-month program at Esalen, then I did a 3-month Eureka program. I was lucky because Oscar came every night to lecture, and he never did that again. It was always the people he taught and worked with the people that came. But the first one, we got to have more time with him.
How many of you was there?
72 of us. Right? And there had been 44 that came from Chile. So the combination of the 72 and the 44 became the core of the Eureka School the way it is now.
And he gave a lecture in English? Or?
Yeah, he gave a lecture in English. His English was not as good as it is now. Of course, he's been in the States for 45 years or so. But it was okay, and he talked about, he used the enneagrams a lot as a figure to show, like for example, the fixations, the ego fixation types or the personality types. And he would put things up on the board, and he would talk about his system and the psyche and how the subjective realms, such as where the ego is, how that works, and what is the distortions that happen for the different, why it is that certain people become more fearful, certain people become more sad, certain people become more angry. And it has to do with our relationships with our father, our mother, or the world. And I was more in the group that had anger issues, due to an absence of my father, who was really quite absent from my life.
Absent.
Absent, yeah, missing from my life. So it made sense to me the way he presented it. And then we worked, people in the same group, as having those anger issues or issues of their self-image. We worked together to explore the way that we, kind of the traps that we had, or the ways that we had trouble in the world. And it started to make complete sense to me. It started to make sense as to what pattern I had been in most of my life, all of my life, and how I could get let's say, back from that and look at it more objectively and transcend by understanding the pattern, the negative patterns. You could transcend, and I started to feel more that I was getting past some of the personality issues that I had. So I became happier. I became more ready.
Became whom?
Happier. I became more
happy. Okay.
I became more happy, more ready to go on to do more work, to get more into meditation and those practices that required more quiet inside, inside quiet, where you could get to those places. So.
And you said that you was a part of angry group.
Yeah.
So you had the groups according to the
fixation, right. We were big enough so that there were several people usually in each fixation group. And there was one group that only had 2, I think, but there were several in the group that I was in. And we realized how similar we had of this pattern of our personality, where we would have trouble, and it started to make sense to me, and it started to give me, it was like having the key to unlock the door to understanding, self-understanding. So it was very powerful.
You discuss in this group these patterns?
Yes, we discussed in the group the patterns, and then we had exercises to deal with those patterns. We had exercises to overcome the negative emotions that that fell into, especially. We studied them all, but there were ones that were more difficult for each group. They were sort of the key to unlocking their particular negative personality structure. It's really a mental structure that we developed of seeing how we saw the world. So I was very mistrustful of others. That was the pattern that I was in. And of course, if you're mistrustful always of others, it's difficult to be happy in life, because we're social beings, we're social creatures. So.
And what method of diagnostic was used? Like, you diagnose yourself or someone is...
No, now we do self-diagnosis. We're given a method, and you're told how to find your fixation, your 3 fixations actually. At that time we just worked with the primary fixation, or the major fixation. Later it developed that you do self-diagnosis for the major fixation, or the major ego structure, and then 2 co-egos. But then they took our picture. They had to know, they had marked on the behind the left side, right side, so there was no mistake which was the right eye, which was the left eye, which was the left side of the face, which was the right side of the face. Then Oscar would look at them, and he would diagnose you from that slide, from that photograph.
From the photograph of both sides of the face?
Well, just a facial photograph where you were just in a neutral pose. You weren't smiling, just looking. And it was marked. He knew which was the left side, which was the right side, because that was part of what is called facial proto-analysis or first analysis. But Oscar was the only one that could really do that 100%.
What is, or maybe was the core of Oscar teaching, especially in the beginning in New York, when you began?
The nature of his teaching, the goal of his teaching was to develop the witness, to develop this place inside of us that is objective and looking at the world without judgment. As they talk about that in Buddhism, they talk about it in many other traditions. But it was to develop, his theory is that his way of looking at the psyche, the human psyche, is that there are two kinds of minds. There's the absolute mind and the relative mind. The relative mind of thoughts and language. The absolute mind, or the more objective mind, is the mind that just is looking at the world without judgments. So I see you, you're doing something. I don't have a reaction to you. I just see that you're you, and you have certain things going on. But the idea is to clarify the relative mind of thoughts and language, which is where the ego resides, so that you can join that mind of non-conceptualization, of non-thought, of just a more objective view of the world. Not that you don't have still a point of view, or, not that you're a robot, but you have less of getting upset by what other people are doing, or what the world is doing to you, or how you are in the world, and how you're reacting to others.
But what's said in this case? What is objective point of view?
No thought. The other basic work and the foundational work was to understand the three instincts. And the three instincts, or the three ways that we exist as a psyche, is one is the way of conserving ourselves, taking care of ourselves. We call that the instinct of conservation. The next, and that's located in the abdominal area in terms of our physical body. Then comes the emotional center, which is the relations to others, the herd, the social aspect of relating to others. Then the third is the mind. So the Gurdjieff, I think, talked about the three centers. Many others have talked about them. So the mind has to do with our reasoning, intellectual abilities, and knowing where we are in the world. The major fixation tends to happen either in one of these three instincts. So we worked a lot with studying what these instincts are and how they work.
You think that mind is also an instinct?
Yes. The instinct of adaptation, or being able to adapt to the world.
And what is the main purpose of life in this case?
The purpose of life is to be happy.
What for?
What for? So that we can realize who we are, and who we are is that we are all connected. We are one body, humanity is one body, one spirit. And unlike in, say, Christian religion, the Son is not an individual, the Son is humanity. The Son of God is humanity. The goal of unity, or the reason why do we do it, is the whole question of enlightenment, and what does that mean? And what it means to me is the understanding that we are all connected, and that I have a purpose, and that I will have another life after this life, and so on and so forth, until the point that I don't need to, I can choose to come back or not to come back, which is more of a Buddhist concept of the bodhisattva.
Tell me the history of Oscar, like how he get the teaching.
Oscar is Bolivian by birth. He's now a United States citizen, but he grew up in Bolivia. His father was a general in the army, and he early in his life, when he was a child, he had epileptic. When he was about to go to sleep, he would have quite often I can't say the word, epileptic seizures, where his heart would stop, and he would think he was going to die. Out of the body experiences. Some of them were good, like experiences of hell. Some of them were like experiences of heaven, so to speak. But he didn't understand what it was. He didn't talk about it with his parents. He was afraid to. He tried to start to find out about what this was and why this happened to him. And so he started. He became a seeker for looking for knowledge, looking for information. So he studied. He studied with he's from an Indian country, Bolivia. There were shamans around, and Indian healers, medicine men, so to speak, shamans. They had certain knowledge. He studied with some of them. They were around. He learned a bit. He learned some things from them. He studied when he was a teenager. It was during the war. He was born in 1930. So when he was a child, the war was going on, and his father, who was high up in the army, there was a Japanese samurai of a tradition who was in the military. He was a military attaché in the Japanese embassy. And the Japanese military man was a samurai from that tradition. And he said, well, if you could come and stay in my house and have more freedom, because they couldn't move around from the embassy because it was wartime. And they were
who could not move
well,
around?
the Japanese, because Japanese? No, the Japanese, because Bolivia was neutral in the war, so they didn't allow them to move. They had to stay in the embassy. The Japanese did, but he invited this military man to come to his house. He said, "But I want you to teach my son." So Oscar learned some of the Japanese arts, particularly the martial arts and the arts of the sword, and so he learned. And then he went on from there. He just became fascinated and obsessed with understanding medicine, and he studied in the university there. He did dissections there to try to understand the body. Then he met some people that were from various spiritual traditions that that was a group that met in Argentina. He started studying with them, and then it was the Kabbalah, it was all kinds of different spiritual traditions. From them, he had made some contacts, and he made some trips to the east, to China. Well, it was then Hong Kong. He could go to. Made some trips to the Pamir, which is part of Russia now, mostly, I believe, some part of Afghanistan, but that plateau. There was a school there that was like, I don't know if it was a Sufi school, but from there he met, he had an introduction into some of the Sufi groups in Iran, particularly. He studied with them. He studied the Chinese classics, he studied yoga, he studied everything that he could find that would teach him.
How he studied Chinese and yoga in Iran? In Iran is another culture.
No, after he went on to continue to be learning. So yoga in India.
How long did he spend in Iran?
I don't know, the duration, I don't know. It might have been a year, might have
And
been.
what was school of?
Well, he said he learned
Sufi.
Kundalini.
Yeah, I mean the Sufi school. What's origin?
Well,
No,
he said there were different Sufi schools. The Naqshbandi was one that he ran into in Iran. That he had some teachings from them. And then he went to India, northern India, studied Kundalini yoga. When he was a child, when he was growing up, he was involved with Zen meditation. So he had a lot of knowledge that he acquired.
why people said that he was in the same school as Gurdjieff, somewhere in the Middle East?
Well, it was that tradition. I think it's a rich tradition that fed probably many different people.
But what's the tradition? What's the school?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a school. He didn't really say it was a school. He just said there was knowledge there, and that he studied with them, and that led him to other things in other parts of the world. So, well, you should go and you should also go here, or you should go there. So people would give him suggestions of other masters or other teachers that he could study with.
But why to look for the other? As I understand, for example, Sufi path is the path. So if you find your teacher, you don't need any other tradition.
Well, he didn't stay in those traditions.
Why?
He learned from them. Well, because he developed his own way of working. He developed his own school.
But did he reach in this tradition something which allow him to create his own school?
Yes. Well, I mean, I can't speak for him, of course.
Yeah, I understand.
But I can speak secondhand only, So I'm limited, what I can tell you. He just was like a sponge, absorbing spiritual information about how the human psyche works, both physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. And after all of this, he started teaching a method of working that involved the enneagram. And the enneagram came from the Greek tradition, Pythagoras especially. And the symbol.
Why did he found it?
But he used it, and he developed a method of working with that symbol to show how energy moves. Bolivia.
I mean, which book he found the enneagram?
I don't know which book, but he had knowledge of the enneagram, and then he started to see how the enneagram would work in terms of movement of energy, and then he started using the enneagram to show depictions of how, for example, the ego structure, the non-ego structure, various things, how the emotions work, how the thought processes work, things about the physical body. So he used it to describe different aspects of ourselves, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So he developed a whole system of enneagrams. But the enneagram was not his invention, but he used it in a different way. So the school he developed uses the enneagram in a major way. It's not the only thing.